snow 3 to 4 inches on Friday. So yeah, we're hoping to get caught up. We're hoping to get caught up tonight. That it doesn't snow a lot tomorrow. That way we have time to be ready for Friday.
So maybe get to some of the side streets tonight.
Yeah, hopefully so. No, we should be on the side streets by the end of tonight. Now that the main roads are pretty well clear.
Yeah, but
the rain's been helping us too, so just need to.
Unless you're blowing snow.
Huh?
Unless you're blowing snow, then you can't blow with the rain.
No.
It just gets all stuck in your machine.
Yeah, it's like plugging it with ice.
Yeah.
We're live, but we'll just wait for Donnie.
Yeah, that's a little bigger than the one I printed. You don't have to knit a bigger one, but then you don't have to. Okay. Yeah, mine's the big one.
I don't know what I would do without Emily. She sends me invites to meetings every day in my head.
That's nice.
She just sent me one.
I guess that's a role keeping you on track. It's pretty pathetic. I'm trying to hold you to the path I leave. It's not working.
I was using a binder clip for a while on mine.
Yeah, it's broken right. Looks like.
Yeah, a binder clip won't work on that.
I won't have to buy a whole new one.
No, I know. Okay, I'll go down. We're gonna have to make Kevin the mayor pro tem. All right. Whenever you're ready, Commissioner.
Call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Commissioner Donnie Carter.
Here.
Commissioner Nina Forsyth.
Here?
Commissioner Kevin Grove.
Here,
And let the record reflect that both Commissioner Adam Ritchie and Mayor Robert Flanagan are absent but excused. The first item on your agenda is a legislative preview. It is, we have virtually joining us up on the screen is Rich Reinhardt. I'm doing this so he can see you all. And he's going to give you a brief presentation, and then you'll have some opportunity for any questions that you have as we look forward to the Maryland 2024 legislative sessions. I'll turn it over to you, Rich.
I don't think you heard it.
All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great, well, welcome back, council. Happy New Year, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today. As Elizabeth said, I want to provide you a high-level overview of the next forecasting of 90 days in Annapolis. We are less than a day away from the first day of session, which will officially kick off tomorrow at 12 noon. But while we're waiting in anticipated breath to start the session, the legislature has already been doing some work ahead of time. As of today, we have seen both the Senate and House chambers already pre-file over 550 some bills in the General Assembly. In approximate total, we see right now 566 bills. 310 of those have been introduced by the Senate, and 256 have been introduced by the House. That is a really historic number when you consider the fact that we haven't even started session, and we're only literally a week into the year. So we anticipate that looking at these projections, there could be potentially 2,000 to 2,500 bills in total that will be introduced this year alone, which again is a very historic number. We're going to be looking through each and every day the bills that are going to be introduced by the General Assembly, and that also includes the legislative package that the administration, Governor Moore, will be presenting. Every week, I will be providing Elizabeth and the mayor a weekly update on what is called bill reports. This bill report will specifically provide you with the list of bills that I have highlighted of interest or potential interest for the city of Frostburg to review. These bills could vary everything between local government to municipal government issues. This could also include housing, transportation, as I said, public safety, and any other variety of in-between items that we think are worth the interest and certainly of concern potentially to the city of Frostburg. Those will be submitted on Friday afternoons to Elizabeth and to the mayor. And throughout the weekend or throughout the week, if there are questions specifically around any of these bills that the council would like me to address, I will be available 24/7, as we say. We're kind of like doctors now during this 90-day session. So anytime you want to reach out to me directly, I will be making myself available to answer your emails, calls, and inquiries. My hope is that ambitiously that while we're going to be looking at these bills, providing you a general overview of what these bills are, my hope is that less is more, meaning that if we do have to take a position or Frostburg specifically has an interest in a bill, we want to make sure that we're using your time appropriately and efficiently. There are a few bills that I had already discussed with the mayor and with Elizabeth prior to the holidays. In particular, the Maryland Municipal League is going to be introducing a piece of legislation around similar to an opportunity zone. It's going to be called a business tourism zone that will be provided for local governments and nonprofits and entities to utilize. This is going to be one of their priority bills, and knowing that Frostburg certainly has a strong tourism attraction across the state, particularly with your neighboring city of Cumberland, with the partnership that you have with the railroad and other opportunities out in Frostburg. This would certainly be one of those bills that I would deem worthy for the council to look at, and certainly for having hopefully the position of support from the mayor in Annapolis. The Maryland Municipal League certainly look to Western Maryland, and particularly our region, as hopefully being a vocal advocate of the bill this year. And so we hope to be working with MML and certainly Frostburg, Cumberland, and other Western regional municipalities to help support this legislation through the 90 days. Putting that aside from just sort of the overall day-to-day operations and weekly reports that I'll be presenting, I am hopeful that this won't be the first time that we'll be able to engage with all of you. Typically, during the 90-day session, I really do enjoy providing a midway briefing to all of my clients. So at the halfway point within our 45-day period, which will generally be around the end of February, if the council permits, I'd like to provide another halfway, 50-50, halfway point, as we call it, overview on where we are and where we're looking at the remaining 45 days left in Annapolis. I think that will kind of give you a gauge on what we've been able to accomplish and what we still have on the working agenda in Annapolis for the remainder of the session. As you've been reading probably in your local news and some of the state media outlets, one of the number one priorities this year is the state budget. Prior to the administration last year, we saw a gainful surplus by the state, and a lot of that was attributed to the COVID federal stimulus money that came into the state. But now with those COVID funding dollars sort of drying up, we're seeing inflation across the country. and we're also seeing a lot of states having deficit issues, and Maryland is not immune to that. Right now, we're looking for this year alone at budget shortfalls of over $322 million. That $322 million is projected to actually grow over the next couple of years. In fact, this past fall, we met and watched and monitored a lot of the briefings held by the Spending and Affordability Committee. And in those briefings, the committee advised prominent members of Annapolis that the projected gap is going to grow in fiscal year 2026 and 2027 from $337 million to respectively $436 million. And by the time we reach fiscal 2028, that gap could potentially grow to nearly $1.8 billion. And then by 2029, we're going to be exceeding that to over a $2 billion structural deficit. So certainly from a financial standpoint, Maryland and the General Assembly have a lot of work ahead of them on how are they going to balance the state's budget, not only for this year, but for the state fiscal years to come. Over the last few weeks and into the month of December, the Spending and Affordability met with, again, prominent members of the General Assembly to discuss recommendations on how we can reduce our structural deficit, particularly for this year specifically. And there were recommendations on reducing the gap by about 33%, which is roughly $508 million. And that could be done through moving budget reversions around, maybe some program cuts, and maybe transferring our capital projects from bonds over into using it instead of cash. Those are just some of the recommendations that were floated around during the conversations with the Spending Affordability Committee. There was also discussions in recommending that in order to help further reduce our budget gap, we would be tapping into the state's rainy day fund, which currently stands at 10% of the current revenues. That proposal would essentially allow lawmakers to pump in an additional $375 million into the budget. This would be a one-time cost to help reduce the budget. So based off of potentially looking at the rainy day fund as our fiscal year savior, and then by making some additional potential cuts, we could see that gap certainly significantly drop. But there is still discussions about what is the long-term goal, what are the long-term strategies in helping mitigate the overall structural deficit, and also how are we going to be facing the cost relative to the blueprint for Maryland's future, which is our investment, our $40 billion investment into public education. Throughout the last couple of weeks, in addition to these recommendations by the committee, legislators have been whispering ideas of potential tax increases. These proposals have not been introduced by pre-filing yet. And certainly there's been discussions, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is called iGaming, which is internet gaming. Internet gaming would expand gaming in Maryland and provide another added resource for the state to supplement our revenues. iGaming last year was introduced in a form of a report that was delivered to the legislature back in December. That report provides some recommendations on how the state would implement iGaming, and we are expecting on January the 18th a legislative briefing on iGaming by the Maryland Lottery. This is just one of many potential avenues that the state is pining on reducing our deficits in the short term and long term. As far as iGaming goes, there are conversations in Annapolis that would essentially permit this iGaming legislation to go to referendum, meaning that they would pass a bill to allow for internet gaming to be on the next election cycle, and this would be in a form of referendum, and allowing and enabling the people of the state of Maryland to determine ultimately if expanding gaming in Maryland is their choice, and a choice that they want to take in order to help cover our existing deficit woes. We are expecting that the budget will be introduced by Governor Moore no later than January 7th. Constitutionally, he has to introduce a budget within the first few weeks of session. So not only do we expect Governor Moore to introduce his operating budget, but the capital budget as well. And once that is introduced, as I do for all of my clients, I do like to provide a high-level overview of both budgets on how this will be impacting not only them specifically, but the overall state, and certainly also from a locality, what are the impacts. The budgets are about 5 volumes, and for the folks in the room, and I'm sort of dating myself here, if you all know what a yellow page phone book used to look like, imagine that with the budget, and that's 5 volumes of it. So it'll take a little bit of time to digest everything, but my hope is that that review and overview of the budget proposal by Governor Moore will be released to you in the matter of 24 to 48 hours once it's released. I'm going to take a quick pause here for a second to see if you had any specific questions on budget, because not only is budget going to be a hot topic, but there's going to be issues related to transportation, public safety, and others. But let me just pause for a second to see if anyone had any questions for me.
The only question I have is, if there's been a lot of talk about the transportation budget being radically reduced. Can you see ways in which it might, affect Western Maryland?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you mentioned that, Councilman, because I'm actually going to go talk about transportation right now. So it's a perfect segue, and I'm going to answer your question in a moment. Let me just give a quick overview of what the leaders are talking about in Annapolis and what's being recommended, and how it could potentially impact Western Maryland. So perfect segue into this subject. So in addition to what I mentioned before about our gaping $376 million budget deficit, and then what our structural deficit could look like, compounding that problem, we also have recently seen the deep cuts into our transportation and our transportation funds. We're seeing a potential reduction of $3.3 billion in the budget, and that includes budget costs to help support road and transit projects. Counties are also now facing additional pressures in not only these cuts will potentially be impacting local shares to the highway user revenues over the next 6 years. These cuts will essentially hit almost every favored project in every jurisdiction in the state. So it is a hard reality that initially was announced during the Winter Mako conference in December by the governor. Agencies within the Transportation Department will each see an 8% cut. Again, local governments will lose aid to prioritize road projects and local transportation networks. There had been some recommendations, like the Spending Affordability Committee. The Transportation Revenue and Infrastructure Needs Commission recently released several recommendations last month on ways to build revenue to help maybe mitigate that $3.3 billion loss. There's a variety of discussions coming out of those recommendations, but some of the more highlighted suggestions or recommendations included charging new fees for owners of electric and hybrid vehicles. There's also been discussions around increasing tolls, and there's also been discussions about having this State Department of Transportation, also known as MDOT, overhaul the process for setting a rolling 6-year list of road and transit projects. Specifically, as it relates to Western Maryland and the region, the impacts to transportation funding could be significant. And I know that our colleagues at the Maryland Association of Counties are taking this very seriously and will probably be leading a lot of the legislative and lobbying charge with their local leaders in Annapolis to vocalize their concerns, and hopefully I can't say for certainty that we will see that money rejuvenated back into the Transportation Trust Fund, but I think MACO and others will be working as much as they can with the state lawmakers to try to mitigate that cost. So it might not be 3.3 billion, it might not be an 8% reduction in the agencies, but it may be something a little bit smaller. It's not going to be eliminated completely, but our hope is that we can at least try to draw on lessening the blow for at least this year and the next couple of years. In terms of the strategy right now, Councilman, I expect myself and others to be meeting with some of our colleagues at MACO and MML to discuss what are some of those strategies and how we can help support them.
Thanks.
You're welcome. In addition to transportation and the budget, this is again as another discussion point that also involves where we are fiscally. And as I mentioned before, it's talking about our long-term education funding. We talked a moment ago about our $40 billion investment over the next 10 years for Maryland's blueprint for Maryland's future, which is i.e. essentially funding our public education systems. This is a large discussion point in Annapolis where there's some feuding counterpoints between not only the House and Senate chambers, but between Democrats and Republicans on looking at ways to mitigate the amount of investment that we're putting forward in the education funding, not only for this year, but for the years out. And as I mentioned before, the Maryland Association of Counties have also a vested interest in this because part of the money that's invested into this initiative is including local government investments. So MACO over the fall provided a long memorandum to the leaders, including governor, on ways that we can reshape the current funding and investment into the blueprint. It'll be a large debate on whether or not those recommendations or suggestions are going to be taken or taken lightly. And it'll be interesting to see what the outcome is related to this investment. There have been some conversations by lawmakers, not only in terms of how we're going to mitigate the issue related to the overall budget deficit, but specifically around our public education investment. There is a so-called millionaire's tax that was previously introduced in 2021. This would raise the income tax rate to 7% for those in Maryland earning more than $1 million. There have been discussions that that bill could potentially be reintroduced and specifically be focused on any revenue generated from that tax would go to help support the blueprint for Maryland. We've had conversations with the governor's office directly, and we've recently saw remarks from the Senate president, both of them expressing that they do not have an interest in raising taxes. And certainly Senate President Ferguson mentioned that there is no appetite in the Senate currently on raising taxes for new projects. The question really is going to be on the shoulders of the General Assembly once the budget is released on whether or not the budget is going to be able to not only help continue to provide the services that Maryland residents have relied on, but any mandated programs in terms of funding, if that will also be able to satisfy those needs, and whether or not those needs will be met in a way in which it will not cause additional tax increases. Right now, the appetite in the House of Delegates, there has been some members that have vocalized in leadership that they have no problem on increasing taxes in certain areas. We're going to have to wait and see over the next 90 days what tax increases, if any, are going to be proposed and introduced, and how they could potentially affect the citizens of the state, but more importantly, how it could impact your local residents in Western Maryland, and specifically in Frostburg. So we'll be watching this closely. Public safety has also been at the top for this year's priorities. Again, you've all been seeing plenty of stories coming out here in the Annapolis, Baltimore area related to the rise in crime, particularly around youth, juvenile crime in Baltimore and in Baltimore City. Public safety has become a large priority now for both the Speaker and for the Senate President. And as of this morning, the governor had a press conference releasing a list of some priority bills related to public safety. Speaker Jones recently talked a little bit about what her legislative agenda will be in addressing juvenile crime. That will, in part, be discussing a reassessment on the protocols of the Children in Need of Supervision. This is a program that's overseen by the State Department of Juvenile Services, which essentially allows representatives of law enforcement to fill out a form to refer youth and their families to a variety of services. This will be one of her priorities and maybe potentially enhancing or tweaking that program with the agency. As far as rolling back any juvenile justice laws that were recently passed by the General Assembly, she's made it very clear that she doesn't want to roll back any of those current initiatives. Again, there may be some tweaks to improving the system overall, but there's no discussion, at least by the Speaker's office, on reopening the current laws. I mentioned a moment ago about Governor Moore and holding his press conference. From what we gathered attending the press conference, there are going to be three major initiatives that he's going to be proposing. One, he will be looking to create an Office of Gun Violence Prevention. There will also be another bill that's going to be increasing apprenticeships in public safety. This is an initiative that will help boost law enforcement officers, or hopefully maybe through the apprenticeship program, maybe enlisting new recruits into law enforcement across the state. And then he's also looking to create a compensation fund for victims of crime. We have not seen any of these bills. He only discussed them at a very high level this morning. We're going to be anxious to see what the details are for all three of those bills. But more importantly, we're going to be looking at seeing what the General Assembly is looking to propose beyond just the leaders in Annapolis. I would say of the topics that I mentioned a moment ago, the budget, transportation, public safety, and I would say housing, affordable housing specifically, are going to be the primary issues that are going to be combating the General Assembly for the next 90 days. In fact, when you look at the pre-filing legislation that we've seen so far, the majority of them are dealing with public housing or assisted living, landlord-tenant issues, and as I said, public safety. So we'll be putting these on your bill reports each week, and hopefully if you have a chance to look them over, if you have any questions about them, or if we need to engage the legislature on any of these bills, we're happy to vocalize your voice in Annapolis. Does anyone have any questions on the high-level overview that I presented, or any logistic questions in terms of our work ahead of us this year?
Okay, thank you very
Well,
much.
again, thank you again for. You're welcome.
And some of us will see you at the at PACE next week in Annapolis.
Yes, looking forward to seeing a lot of you there in Annapolis. I'm actually engaging with the governor's office right now. There's a possibility some of his staff, or maybe the governor himself, will be in the reception at some point in the evening. So if you're all around, there'd be a great opportunity to have some FaceTime with him and his team.
Great. Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon. Speaking of budget, talking of the city's budget, at your council meeting next week, there will be a resolution to have some budget amendments for the current year budget. We typically do this either in December or January each year, and we posted a draft version of some amendments yesterday online. made some more revisions today. I anticipate there will be a few more changes before we get to the actual resolution next week. I just want to give you a brief summary of what is included in this version of the amendments, and then you can review it at your leisure this week. If you have any questions, let me know. This also gives the departments involved a chance to look at what I'm proposing as well. So, first of all, on a positive note, the proposed amendments reflect an increase in interest income citywide. The money market account where most of the city's cash is held is still earning a little over 4%, which when we did the budget last spring, we weren't sure how long rates would hold, but the city is still benefiting very well from that. So the interest earned through December already exceeds what we had projected for the year as a whole. So the amendments do increase the interest income. Obviously, when we do the budget, we're always more conservative on the revenue side, which we want to be careful as we make those projections, but the interest income included in these amendments is about $250,000 citywide, so that is substantial. I did overlook increasing the interest in the Piney Surcharge Fund in the draft document, so that will be increased as well for the resolution next week. So that's the good side. We can report additional income. Kind of on the negative side, which we were aware of after the budget was passed last year, is we had increase in health insurance premiums this year. For city employees and retirees, the increase was about 45% on our premiums this past year. The previous years, we had done very well with Cigna, minimal increases, but there was a significant increase last year. So in looking at the increased premiums, as well as looking at actual changes in enrollment during the year compared to what was budgeted, use of deductible as of December, these amendments include an overall increase in health insurance expense citywide of $58,000. So again, we knew about that, just not in time for it to be included in the budget ordinance last spring. There were also some changes in our enterprise fleet lease expense. Some of that happens because of changing assignments of vehicles. For example, we budgeted for one in the administrative category in the corporate fund. As it turned out, we didn't get a vehicle used in the corporate fund, but Public Works was assigned a truck. So part of that's just moving money in between departments. The net change citywide is an increase in fleet expense of just over $12,000. So you'll see that spread between funds. And as always, projects are a challenging part of the budget, both from the expense side and the revenue side. We try and reevaluate estimated project completion dates, the associated reimbursements. We still have a lot of ARPA projects going on. We have other capital projects. There's a lot of recreation grant-funded projects. We have the Mechanic Street parking lot still under design. The Child Care Center construction has begun. That's just to name a few. So there's a lot of uncertainty as to where they will be at June 30, but at least we try to evaluate where they are as of now. So you'll see some changes in those line items. You do get ARPA project updates every month from Lydia, so you're aware of those changes. Some of the items in the budget, it's just a matter of changing the line item they appear in, where we included them in the original budget versus where they've been coded during the year is a little different. So you'll see equal dollars in and out within a certain fund. We did not change any numbers on the CSO project expenses or reimbursements in this version of the budget amendment. We just didn't have time to really dig into that. So we will look at those more closely for the amendments at the end of the year, when we definitely have better information available to make the budget more accurate. The last category I want to mention as far as budget amendments, there's always those unknown expenses or changes in revenue sources compared to last April when the budget ordinance was introduced. One example, we have a decrease in parking revenue because of the decision to remove parking meters. So that's a little over $12,000 less in revenue that we'll save. We already talked about health insurance increase. You just heard from the lobbyist, so that was an addition to one expense line item. Again, We weren't aware of that last spring, but now that we are, we can make the budget reflect more accurately our anticipated expenses. We have the bonuses that were approved for city employees and distributed in December. That's a change in the administration budget. Holly Jolly grants is an increase in tourism expense. We've had some additional IT and digital engagement expenses. NeoGov is being implemented. That's a new program. Additional expenses with Civic Plus. So just a few things like that where we can make the budget reflect the expenses that we've become aware of. So again, you can look at these in detail over the next week. We'll again make some revisions between the version that's online now and the final resolution. What we'll do for next week for the resolution, instead of seeing every line item in the budget, I'll narrow that down and just show you the lines that have changes. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or I'm always available in the office or by email.
Thanks, Elaine.
Okay.
The next item is, we'd be requesting a resolution to abate real estate property taxes at 42 North Water Street. The city has owned this property for some time now. It was foreclosed on through, it went to tax sale, no one purchased the tax sale certificate. So when no one purchases the tax sale certificate at the county tax sale, it reverts to the city. City gets the tax sale certificate, but then we're stuck with all of the expenses. The same process is going to happen with 36 North Water, but there is some title issue with that property that it'll be a bit before the city can take clean ownership of that. So right now we're just recommending the abatement of the taxes on 42 North Water, and this would write off 5 years of outstanding taxes and get it off of the city's books. So total, including principal and interest, a little over $1,800. Is there anything you wanted to add for that, Elaine?
And the city doesn't recognize the interest income until we actually collect, so we're really not out that money. It's just the principal that we've been recognized as a receivable, so it's not a valid receivable. We should get it off the books.
And so, and then just while we're on that subject, an update on that project. That's 42 North Water. 36 North Water is in the weird limbo stage. And then we closed on 34 North Water last Friday. Yes. The Friday the 29th of December, yes. So we'll be working on getting arrangements in place to do asbestos testing and everything so the buildings can be raised. We might actually be raising 36 before we own it because it's a public safety hazard at this point. But we have mechanisms to do that within code enforcement, and I'm hoping that we get some assistance from the community enhancement program from the county towards demolition expense. So, okay, any questions on that? Right, that will be a resolution as well. Hayden, you're up.
Yep, so we've officially gotten the go-ahead from MDE to proceed with Phase 10A. They've approved the bid package from Braddock Construction. So MDE has given us the approval to award the bid for Phase 10A of the CSO. So I would just ask for approval of the low bid for Phase 10A for the next CSO. It's that number there, $1,472,977. The other bidders were EA Construction, Excavation Associates, and First Fruits. There were comparable bids, but Braddock was definitely the lowest. So it would be my recommendation to move ahead with them. They've done really well on Phase 9C, so they work well with our group, and they know how the CSO stuff works here. So.
And this project was approved by the Board of Public Works as well last week. So once the city awards that contract, they would be free to start working.
We would hope for them to start ordering material, mobilizing, getting as much as ready as they can, working when they can, when the weather breaks, and then they will have a hard start date of usually about April 13th. So.
Okay. The next item is a clerical issue that the Board of Elections has requested be addressed. In the working through Ordinance 2023-04 last year, which changed provisions to the election, I was the intermediary between the Board of Elections and the city attorney to develop the ordinance. And in the first version of the ordinance that Michael Cohen suggested, it was to remove the provision for write-in candidates because we do the mail-in election. However, the Board of Elections did not agree with that decision, and instead the write-in candidates provision was left. The only thing that was changed was now write-in candidates need to file 35 days in advance instead of 25 days in advance, which makes sure no one receives a ballot before a write-in candidate can file. However, in the preamble to the resolution, I did not catch that this one whereas clause remained that said that, yeah, it's removing write-in candidates. So it doesn't affect law when it's codified with the city, like the preamble doesn't show up, but this is obviously the official ordinance document. Mm-hmm. And the Board of Elections has requested either like a memo to file, or if you wanted to do a resolution saying that this was not the intent and this was simply a clerical error, that remained in the ordinance preamble. Do you have a preference on how we handle it, whether it's a memo to file that the mayor and council sign, or would you rather just do a resolution to address it?
If the memo, does the memo kind of get attached to
Yes.
that? I think that would be better, because it's not like, if somebody is trying to look up, when something happened, it would be
Mhm.
easier to locate it if it's attached to the preamble.
Okay, so with that being the case, we can address it right here and right now. If I could get a motion in a second to do that, and then I would prepare it and have it ready for signature next week.
What's it called, memo to file?
Yeah.
I move we approve the memo to file to rectify the whereas in the preamble.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye. He's laughing at me.
Thank
Trying
you.
to word this.
Okay, thank you very much. Something that was discussed at your work session last month, or 2 months ago, I don't remember for sure, but was doing the manufacturer's personal property tax exemption. Michael Cohen, the city attorney, has drafted this as a charter amendment to repeal and replace the current charter provision related to the manufacturing tax credits, which is not the way the city charter is currently written is not entirely permissible under state law to begin with. So it cleans up something and then puts in enabling legislation that manufacturing equipment and inventory would be exempt from personal property tax in the city of Frostburg.
What was the part that was not legal by state law?
Let me pull up if you give me just a moment, I will pull up that charter provision, and it specifically says that there's the city can offer property tax credits for a period of 10 years to manufacturers. And we do not have the authority to do property tax credits without enabling legislation from the state. So the current charter addresses both personal and manufacturing. So because this is a charter amendment, there needs to be an advertised public hearing, which needs to be advertised in the paper no later than 21 days in advance. So this would not come to your agenda until the February meeting. And if it is approved at the February meeting, it would go into effect on or around April 10th, I think was the math that I did, if it is not petitioned to referendum.
Okay.
Any questions or concerns on that? Okay. Thank you. I will get that advertisement in the paper. The next thing, I've spoken to Elaine and Jeff Barclay at the county. So the manufacturing property tax exemption came about because Sierra Hygiene recently invested a lot in their 60,000 square foot expansion in Frostburg, and has a manufacturing equipment assessment that's somewhere around $6.5 million now. So they report that on their personal property taxes to the state of Maryland, and the state of Maryland issues the finance department a report in which the finance department then generates personal property tax bills. And so Sierra Hygiene paid a personal property tax bill of $97,996.95 in this current fiscal year, which was unplanned revenue from the city's perspective. So Sierra Hygiene is debating on another expansion at the Frostburg facility that could potentially double their square footage again.
Double, wow.
Yeah. So you still collect real property taxes off of these, businesses and their properties that they own, plus the job, everything else that goes along with it. They understandably, they still have a little bit of heartburn about being hit with this bill. So what I would propose for your consideration is a resolution that would give Sierra Hygiene 2 to 3 years. That time frame could be your discretion to pursue the expansion of their facility. And if they were to pursue the expansion of the facility, the city would either not, that we would provide $80,000 worth of assistance, whether that's permit fees, inspection fees. They had to do a lot of UL inspection fees on their new equipment because it was from overseas and not UL stamped, and or their soft cost to their engineering firm or something. We could reimburse them for that. So 80, 85,000, the whole amount, that doesn't matter. But just that was kind of a thought of a gesture, but then also being able to, help facilitate their expansion here in Frostburg. So does that sound agreeable? And what number are you thinking? All of it, 90% of it?
What would we, with the new thing going in, would we have gotten anything?
Nope.
Just do all of it
Okay.
then.
Okay.
All of the increase, not the total bill.
Yes, all of
The increase. Yeah.
the increase. Yeah, so you'll have to tell me what that number would be. 90, 89.
Well, the prior year bill was like 18,000.
Okay, so 80,000 was about
So-
rough. Want to just keep it 80,000 then?
And then we would just be budgeting for that,
Decrease going forward.
the decrease in revenue, but if we're
Yeah.
paying soft,
Yeah.
permitting fees, we just wouldn't have
Charge.
billed them, but if we reimburse them for
Mhm.
so that would run through the community development,
Right.
economic
Development.
development expense.
Sure. We'll figure that out. Okay.
And they're operating under the name Vertical Converting rather than Sierra Hygiene. We may just want to specify their actual account number in
Okay.
case the name changes again. There's no
Yeah.
confusion about who is entitled to this benefit.
And yeah, who's DBAing us who, and yeah.
If we go with their specific personal property account number,
Okay.
that's pretty clear.
Vertical converting is an odd name. could never guess what it was referred to.
Making big rolls of toilet paper into little rolls of toilet paper. They do much more now in their new facility, from what I understand. I haven't toured it. Have you? Okay. So that would be a resolution at this coming month's meeting, if that's okay with you. Okay. All right, with it being January, I just wanted to review various schedules with you that will also be presented or attached to the council meeting agenda. The first is the budget prep schedule for the 2024-2025 fiscal year budget. The second would be the 2024 election schedule. This was published last week on January 3rd. Filing forms are now available for anyone interested in running for office in the city of Frostburg. And then election day will be on June 4th, and the election results will be certified on Friday, June 14th. A few of the dates did change as a result of 2023-04 ordinance and the last two charter amendments, but probably the most notable is that the filing deadline for candidates is earlier this year. It is March 20th, 2024, and that's to give ample time administratively to get the ballots ready for printing. Any questions on the election schedule? And then the 2024 garbage and special collections. Nothing really exciting other than when holidays fall on garbage days, when garbage day is postponed to, when yard waste collections will be, and then the annual bulk pickup is the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday prior to Memorial Day, and next Friday, Friday 19th, would be the second of the two Christmas tree curbside collections.
Speaking of garbage, the dump closed at like 9:30, 10 o'clock this morning, so we couldn't finish everyone's trash on today's route. We're just planning to pick those up tomorrow. So if you get questions about it, if someone says I didn't get my trash picked up today, we're going to get it tomorrow.
Okay, Hayden, do you want to touch base on the funding request presentation for PACE next week?
Yeah, so for PACE, we actually got more funding last year than we expected. It wasn't exactly what we hoped for, but 10A, 10B, and 10C are moving ahead. So what we're going to ask for this year, what I would like to ask for, obviously, is North Grant and Center Street, which North Grant is already designed. It was an ad alternate from a project from Phase 5. And then Center Street, that was an ad alternate from our most recent 9C project. Both of those ad alternates were denied at the time, just didn't get funding for them, so we said no to them. So both of those projects are designed. They're both fairly small budget projects. Originally, we were thinking they'd be around $350,000 2 years ago. Just to be safe, we would estimate them both at maybe a little over $500,000 now. So cumulatively, we'd ask for anywhere from $1.1 million to $1.2 million total budget for the project at PACE. But we have designs for both. Just present on both of those at PACE because we already have the designs, and they're pretty small budget ones. They should be.
What percentage do you think they'll?
I don't know. I mean, we'd hope for out of we probably got 25% grant funding for the Phase 10 projects, and then if you count the loan forgiveness as a grant, so to speak, that brings us up to probably 60-70% grant for those projects. So if we could get something similar for these projects, that would be worth doing, in my opinion. So,
The other nice thing about those PACE funding meetings is that there's different funding agencies in the room. So CDBG has a funding cap of $800,000 with both of these being smaller projects. If one of the projects is in a low mod income area, it's potential that we could apply to CDBG for a larger grant portion for one of the projects. So being able to sit down with the funding agencies and have that dialogue certainly can benefit the city.
and we have reason to believe they both might fall into those income categories, specifically Center Street. So, but yeah, I think they'd be nice, easy ones to knock out, present on, and go from there. So,
Okay. Lydia has prepared a ARPA update sheet for you. The reason we haven't talked about this for a while, but probably the more pressing project that we would like to prioritize with a resolution maybe as early as next week would be the purchase of a plow truck. The prices on those vehicles seem, to be going up, and Shane spoke with the representative on the state bid contract, which is generally how you would like to purchase something like that, because you're getting the best negotiated price. It's for an international, but ballpark high-end price is $238,000. But I think Shane, in talking to some other vendors of other truck brands, Kenworths are approaching $300,000 for the equivalent, not on a state bid. So
yeah, we're seeing pretty much 25 to 30% increases every year on the price of equipment. So next year, I would imagine we'll crest 300,000 on the cheapest trucks. So.
But again, that will be a nice truck. It would have a stainless steel bed, so we're not replacing the steel bed with a stainless steel bed in 3 years. And things like that. It'll have the same kind of plow that we're currently using, so it's interchangeable with the other trucks. And it'll have the engine and the gear ratio that's suitable to Frostburg. So,
So we can get 8,000 of that funded by ARPA. Is that what that says? This line
look
item?
up one line. So
Oh, I'm sorry,
it
wrong
says-
line. I was gonna say, that's not a
Yeah,
line.
when we last talked, it was 200, so
Yeah.
I can adjust that to 238 if you'd like.
I think for $8,000, we might just get the tires.
Yeah.
Barely. Might get half of them.
So, but you can see on like some of general sewer project, general water project, general water treatment project, there's a lot of remaining funds that can be tapped from there. Especially the water treatment plant, we're trying to use surcharge money at the plant instead of ARPA funds because we have sufficient, because of the timber sales and other revenues and having debt paid off, there's ample funds to pay for some of these water treatment plant upgrades. Is your microtech project done, Hayden?
Just retainage is left right now.
Did it come in a lot lower than expected?
No, pretty much right on budget.
Okay.
The microtech one is under a different one than
Oh,
general.
it's a different line item. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay.
It's the water treatment plant system upgrade,
Okay.
so it's
All
about
right.
36 yet.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry. And then we do have a contingency line item at the end that we've kind of just earmarked for the Gateway project, the roundabout, if there was a shortfall. But all of this money has to be obligated by December 31st of this year, which means we are under contract or have placed an order for. So it is important that we are diligent in spending money. But, you know, obviously a lot of these projects have been water and sewer based, some paving, and some parks and rec, and then a few of the community development projects in there, so. Is there anything you wanted to add, Lydia?
Just that we'll be moving forward with the comprehensive plan soon. Community development is, I think they prepared the final draft of the RFP, so they're looking to put that out by the end of the month. Mechanic Street parking lot design is almost done, just waiting to clarify a few things with optimized renewable for the solar canopies. And the Child Care Center construction is underway. The block is laid and they're just waiting for weather to break for the foundation. So those are a couple of the big ones coming up or currently working on.
Any questions on that? We may not have a firm quote on the plow truck by next Tuesday. Would you be amenable to a resolution to order it off the state bid not to exceed $238? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Thank you. One thing is just kind of a community update. The Allegheny County Economic Development is leasing the office space, so behind the storefronts in the Lyric building, for a new tech incubator that they're working on getting up and running. Do you know, Bethany, did they get, I think they got some state grant money or something for that?
I am not privy to that.
Okay, alright, I think they got some grant money to help facilitate, getting that started, but, you know, they see Frostburg downtown, as a good, community to support such an incubator space. In talking to them, just casually about that lease, I said, why don't you lease the Lyric Theater too? I know people would like to rent that, it kind of just sits idle now.
Yeah.
And so they do have that theater space under, they're leasing that as well. And
what?
just as they're just leasing it from the building owner,
Okay.
and then it would be like a community space, just like City Place or whatever. They intend to price it higher than any of our facilities for rentals. I wanted to make sure before we did it that you would be agreeable to us just advertising that that's also available for rent on our website, but that they'd have to go through Allegheny County to book it. We may, I'm not sure yet, be asked to provide housekeeping services for just the theater space, not the bathrooms or anything else. So, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I know, some of the performing arts, class schools here are interested in running it for performances and stuff, so.
I remember taking some ballroom dance instructions there.
Well, there you go. So, okay. That is all I have. Is there anything else the council has for the good of the order?
Yeah, Liz, the Frostburg Housing Authority, we, should be getting you, we have one renewal and one brand new member, will be Whitney Costello.
Okay.
I'm not sure who the renewal is, but they took over a term for somebody, so they were in a short term instead of the 5-year.
Okay.
So I'll get with Ashley and have her send you what you need for that.
Yeah, if I have it by Friday, it could be a resolution for next week.